These episodes are heavy on action. They're even giving us kind of our first taste of Titan on Titan fighting. It also features some significant character development really well, and it answers at least one key question, but the show's really good at answering questions in a way that make me ask like 5 more. I don't know how this show keeps twisting me up, but it does, so hey, let's get to it. Immediately, episode 6 establishes like this great bleak situation because the cadets are all stuck in hostile territory and they're running out of gas, like the compressed air or the compressed gas that powers their mobility devices. They're also cut off from resupply, so they're kind of like this island of survivors in this hostile territory, surrounded by Titans. No help is on the way. They have to get themselves out of what they're in right now. And you know, maybe not only is the resupply staff unable to help them, but perhaps their will's broken too. We're going to see that explored a little bit more as the episodes unfold. But it absolutely establishes that there's a bleak situation, a desperate situation. And of course, when resourceful characters are faced with a desperate situation, well, that means it's going to lead to a desperate plan. So this is one of those great storytelling conflicts, and it makes everything seem hopeless, like it really needs to be about as dark as it can get, that there's no hope for winning or no hope for surviving this situation. It just ratchets up the viewer's emotions and reactions to the events that are going to follow. And another key to what's unfolding here is that extreme stress leads to a change in individuals. So putting them in this extremely stressful, high probability of failure situation, well, it's a great scenario in which character development can occur concisely, but also appropriately and believably. So this is all a wonderful setup for this sort of focal point in what I'm imagining is about the first quarter to the first third of this season of storytelling. And just to help kind of flesh out the situation, to let us know what it's like in this world that we're spending time in right now. We see a supply soldier. He's like this young guy, and he's cleaning his rifle. It doesn't quite make sense. He's sort of in with a group of a few other resupply soldiers. They're barricaded behind some overturned desks, trying to just avoid the Titans that have infiltrated the headquarters there. And he's just slowly cleaning his rifle. He's loading his rifle. You know, maybe the people next to him think he's going to try to defend himself should the Titans make it to their barricade. But that's not at all what this guy's plan is. He just kind of calmly places it in his mouth, and then he engages the firing mechanism. And in a show where I'm always trying to stay on guard, it just continues to catch me off guard, because I didn't expect just sort of a slow, deliberate self-elimination to kind of be where the episode would start off with. But it absolutely is effective at setting the tone and my emotional state, put me in a position where the things that follow are going to have the greatest possible impact on. It also is an effective way to show the hopelessness and the helplessness of these resupply soldiers, because I think it's real important for this couple of episodes to work, this whole stretch of stories to work, that the show has to build some sympathy for these resupply soldiers. If you don't build some sympathy for them, then that's, you know, going to make us simply see them as cowards or failures or as another type of bad guy. But instead, the way that they're handling this, it leads the viewer to see them as more than that. And like I said, to sympathize or at least empathize with them. Back out in the city on the rooftops, Mikasa reconnects with the squad, or at least the squad survivors. And Armin has the, I guess I would say, unfortunate task of letting Mikasa know who didn't survive. And of course, among those names that he mentions is Eren. Now, she really shows no emotion here. And this is absolutely not in any way what I expected. She seems so focused on the task at hand that at first, you know, I thought she's completely unaffected by this. I mean, it's totally inconsistent with all the various ways I had it mapped out in my head that she was going to handle this. I could see a berserk mode, I could see a shutting down, I could see apathy overtaking her. What I didn't see was her to act like it was no big deal or to handle it as if it was no big deal. This is not how I saw this playing out. Continues to surprise me on a show where I had like 10 different scenarios. You'd think you make enough guesses, at least one of them's going to be right. I'm still not always doing that here. However, I will say that in short order, we do see her kind of rush into battle, and she rushes into battle somewhat foolishly. I'd say we see her acting a lot more like what we've come to expect from Eren than what I would expect from Mikasa at this point. And then I'm thinking here as I see this out of Mikasa, I'm thinking that maybe she's trying to just end it all. You know, maybe she's trying to do it in a way that doesn't appear intentional on the surface to the people watching. But before she does rush off, Mikasa takes a moment to declare her awesomeness to everyone. And this seemed a little bit like hubris to me. You know, I'm going to reference Greek storytelling a lot, I think, when I'm analyzing these two episodes. And hubris is when the hero thinks that they are mightier than the gods that give them their power, that they don't need to worry about obstacles, that they're invulnerable. You know, you express that hubris as a character in Greek drama, and in short order, bad things are going to happen. So she's expressing hubris here, at least that's what it seems like to me. And then I start to think about this a little bit more, and a lot of these thoughts are in retrospect as I'm putting notes together and thinking about the story, not when I'm watching it in real time. Like, some of these things take time to come to me, but I started to wonder if she's sort of giving herself something like an advance eulogy. Like, she knows she is on a collision course with death here, and this is her giving herself her own eulogy in a way in front of all the other troops and hoping maybe her death will inspire. I don't exactly know. Or maybe she has reached this nihilistic phase where she just doesn't care. I think that's a very real possibility. But anyway, she is soon revealed to need some help after all, which this I kind of saw coming. Maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. Maybe I thought she's just awesome enough that she could be awesome. She does go on to use her gas irresponsibly. I think it's Armin. People point out, like, she's using too much gas as she rushes into this battle. Like, there's no way it's going to last long enough to fight the battle and still evacuate. And that's, I think, telling us, the viewer, I think that's telling us that she has no plans to return, that this is a one-way ticket, in her opinion, a one-way trip. I think it's letting me know, or I'm inferring, whether or not it's implied, that she's not expecting to need that gas for very long. And this, to me, I love to talk about echoes and reflections. I've done that in other shows that I've talked about, but particularly here in Attack on Titan, I think this is an echo of that suicide that we saw earlier in the episode. Like, this is an echo of a different type of an attempt, and it's going to have a different result. One is successful, one isn't successful. Or you could flip it around and look at it from another perspective. The one that seems successful is the failure, and the one that seems like a failure is successful. You know, you can twist and toss and play the game of semantics. But at the end, I do like how we see these echoes of suicide playing out here in this episode, at least in my opinion. But regardless of her intentions, Mikasa does mow down a lot of Titans in the process. I mean, there is no denying that she is an awesome Titan fighter, just as she proclaimed herself to be, but maybe she's not the one-person army that can solo every one of the Titans out there like she kind of proclaims before rushing off without enough gas. But of course, Mikasa's charge leads to its natural conclusion, because she runs out of gas for her omnidirectional mobility device. And I think she only has like half a blade left, because she's just been hacking and chopping and cutting people down. And naturally, the blades get dulled and they don't last forever. They even look kind of like box cutters that are made to break off so you have a sharper point down below. But she's out of gas, she's almost out of blades, and she gets pinned in by this hopeless situation. She's trapped in an alleyway with no mobility device. Eventually, she even gets pinned in between two Titans. And during this whole hopeless situation, what looks like it's going to be the last stand for Mikasa, she notices this pomegranate. And as the viewer, our attention is focused on this fruit for a moment. So of course, the way that this is handled, the way that it's portrayed on the screen, this is going to lead me to try and parse out the symbolism that the storytellers are emphasizing here with this lingering on the pomegranate. And it's partially sliced open to draw our attention to the structure of the inside of the pomegranate as well. Now, maybe there's some kind of universal significance to a pomegranate that I'm just not aware of, and I'm totally open to that fact that maybe I'm missing the obvious and I'm thinking too hard about it. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Greek myth of Persephone. Just briefly, there's this Greek myth about a person or a goddess named Persephone, and she is the queen of spring, you could say, or the queen of light, and Hades falls in love with her, and there's some treachery where she has to spend time with Hades, but if she can stay a certain amount of time without eating a single thing, then she can come back and be in the light. But if she eats anything at all, then she's going to be trapped to some degree with Hades. She ends up in a moment of weakness eating a single pomegranate seed, and because of that, she spends half of her time in the light, half of her time in darkness. And then the seasons come to reflect that, like spring is signifying when Persephone is returning to the light. Fall is signifying when Persephone is returning to the dark. So half the year in the light, that's our spring and summer. Half the year in the dark, that's our fall and winter. That's how that plays out. So at this point, I'm trying to see how I can apply this to what Mikasa is experiencing in the story. Like, is she going to spend half her existence in the darkness? Is she going to spend half her existence in the light? Or if I look a little bit deeper, is she making the opposite choice than Persephone? Like, what we're seeing here is Mikasa in the darkness when she sees that pomegranate. She is in this nihilistic place. She's exhibiting hubris. She's essentially committing suicide by Titan right now. She sees that pomegranate, and unlike Persephone, she's able to resist it. So she can resist what Persephone can't resist. Maybe she's putting the darkness inside of herself aside at this moment, which kind of flows pretty well with what's going to happen next in the story. And also, maybe I'm making too much out of the pomegranate. Maybe it's a simpler clue, like just the way that the seeds are nested inside the fruit. Maybe that could be foreshadowing of the way that Eren will be revealed soon as we get into episode 8. Also, before we move on, I just want to point out there's like this chart, one of the informational charts, that shows the different sizes of the Titans. To kind of put it simply, the Titans come in 3 different sizes. And I started wondering about that. And my first thought is, why are some bigger? Why are some smaller? Wouldn't it be better if they were all just the big, massive Titans? At first then, I started thinking maybe it's just kind of random. Like there's no real reason to it. It's just to give some artistic variety in the images. But I got myself to think just a little bit deeper. And I started thinking about practical reasons that there might be 3 sizes of Titans. With the 50-meter Titan, the largest Titan, a relatively recent occurrence from what I can gather. But the 50-meter Titan is effective for breaching the walls, as we've seen now twice at this point in the story. But he would be too large and too clumsy at effectively navigating the streets and taking out the individual humans. And this also answers a question I had, but I never asked really in any of the previous videos. But I was wondering, if the Colossal Titan can teleport, why does he teleport outside the walls? Why doesn't he just teleport behind the walls and inside the city? But he'd be too clumsy in that situation. He has a specific job to do, and that's to breach the wall. Then you've got these 15-meter Titans, and I think of them as sort of the shock troops. Maybe they're the bulk of the invasion force. And they go in and they clear the streets and they breach the buildings and the houses. They break the walls on a smaller scale. They engage the majority of the defense forces too. They're going to get the soldiers, the garrison, the scout regiment. They're going to get them out of their buildings, out of their headquarters, onto the rooftops, because they're going to be fighting this threat of these 15-meter Titans. It's also going to keep the defense forces distracted for a while. And then meanwhile, while the 15-meter Titans are causing havoc in the streets and engaging the military, well, then these 4 to 5 meter sized Titans, they can actually enter the structures and ferret out the sequestered humans. And these Titans are less powerful, but I'm going to imagine they are typically targeting the humans who are more or less not properly equipped to fight back. And this is sort of highlighted by how easily they're defeated when they do encounter some trained armed resistance in episode 8. But of course, easy is a relative term here. And as these episodes start to unfold, something else that's really worth talking about and that I spent some time thinking about is Jean's leadership development. Because the show does an excellent job, or at least in my opinion, it does an excellent job of showing Jean's development. And I think it does a pretty good job of convincing me to give him a second chance, because if you watched my reaction video to episode 3, I had written him off as a villain on the show. Now, I do like the idea of a reluctant leader, not just in fiction, but I kind of think in real life. I like the idea of a reluctant leader. And the reason is because I think reluctant leaders probably make the best leaders. They're not ego-driven. They're more survival-driven or driven by pragmatism. In fact, I would go so far as to say anybody who wants to be a leader should automatically be disqualified for the job. That's my own version of a catch-22 rule, like I talked about a couple of episodes back in one of the videos. But it is pointed out verbatim in the episodes that we're watching that Jean is not strong. And because Jean is not strong, he understands the weak. And this suits him well for a leadership position because he's going to have the interests of the weak at heart, not just the strong, awesome, you do what I do, Mikasa approach. And I think this keeps him really grounded in reality because we see, like I've just said, if Mikasa were the leader, her plan would just be, hey, let's just charge at the Titans and kill them. No big deal. Let's do it. Can't we do it? Of course we know that not everyone can do it. So it's kind of hard to get people to follow you, in my opinion, if everything seems easy, or if it seems like you're being cavalier without thought of consequences. And those kind of leaders do tend to get everyone killed, a fact Mikasa will herself realize a little bit later on. To kind of discuss the leadership a little bit more, I suppose if you'd allow me to use a sports analogy, it's kind of like the superstar athletes don't usually become superstar coaches because maybe they don't have to struggle in a certain way that makes them more equipped at teaching. I don't know because I'm neither a superstar athlete nor a superstar coach, so I'm just kind of guessing here. Another analogy that might work is, the best actors don't necessarily make the best directors, and maybe it's just hard to teach a skill to someone else if that comes naturally to oneself. There is a great scene around this time also, just on screen, a visual that I just want to mention because I love the way it looked. There's this big hole knocked in the wall of the supply headquarters, and we see two Titans look in. And it kind of struck me that this is a very suburban mom and dad type looking Titans. Like the faces seem so middle class and non-threatening, but that makes them extra creepy. And these Titans are staring through the hole at the people that are trapped in the headquarters. And this fist just smashes into the side of the face. And when it smashes in there, you can see this shockwave traveling through the faces, and it looks great. I just gotta say, my compliments to the chef on this one. Now, Armin lays out their plan of action to take out 7 of these 4-meter or so tall Titans, the ones I'm calling the ferrets. And they've currently infested the supply room, and this plan goes to show what can be accomplished with a little human ingenuity and a whole lot of shotguns. So the plan is that the bulk of the supply soldiers and the survivors of the squad are going to be in this lift, all with shotguns and a 360-degree outward array. They're going to wait till all the Titans close in. They're going to blast the shotguns at once into their eyes, blind the Titans. At that moment, some of the other soldiers with their blades are going to jump out of the rafters, hit their weak spots, and drop all 7 of the Titans at once. And the plan goes mostly perfectly, except Potato Girl, Sasha, and Connie, well, they actually fail to bring down their Titans, which could have been a really big hitch in the plan, but Mikasa and Annie come to the rescue. And I don't quite know how Mikasa got back up in the rafters and back down again, or if she can just jump that high. Same goes for Annie. But in this moment, I think the value of this scene to the story that's being told is if it hadn't done so already, this sequence shows us that Annie is to be respected also. Probably on the same level of Mikasa. If not on the same level, at least closer than any of the other characters. And if you remember my comments in the past about 3-step storytelling, I think this is step 2 in those 3 steps with Annie. I imagine the next thing we're going to see is Annie leading a Mikasa-like charge, killing a bunch of Titans in a desperate situation. Of course, everything I expect seems to mostly be wrong, but I can't help but expect things. That's human nature. When Mikasa seems to be reaching the end of her proverbial rope, when she's trapped out there in the alleyway, before we get to all this that happens at HQ, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Armin's development there. But switching back to Mikasa, her gas runs out, she's trapped in the alleyway, she's trapped between a couple of Titans, she's at the end of her proverbial rope, as I said, and we notice that one of these Titans is a different type of Titan. And it just attacks the other Titan. It has these pointy ears, too, as a visual cue to help us see that it's different than the other Titans. He even puts up his dukes in a really human way, like he's ready for a boxing match. And this Deus Ex Machina totally thrilled me. And often when people hear or use the phrase Deus Ex Machina, they immediately think of it as a negative thing, but that's not always true. Now, as used originally in Greek drama, which I said I was going to reference a lot, it was sort of a poor device. But a couple thousand years of storytelling refinement, and it can be one of the most satisfying story points in literature. particularly when all the necessary components have been put in place so that it does follow the rules of the story, and when we become so invested in the moment that we need that rescue, the person consuming the story just as much as the characters in the story need that rescue, well, it comes through and we're filled with elation and we're impacted. Also, when that device, that Deus Ex Machina, persists and it develops, and the event is a developmental moment in the story as a whole rather than just some kind of easy solution, well, all those things can go together to make it just this wonderful thing to experience. And in my opinion, in this story, this is a prime example of that device being done right. But more importantly, Mikasa emerges from this changed. She has remorse for how her recklessness endangered others, and change is such an important part of the hero's journey. Though I don't intend to suggest that this story simply follows Campbellian structure, it does successfully demonstrate it at times, particularly times like this. Now back to Armin putting his talents to work, developing this plan that works. His intelligence is being utilized in a very different way than I envisioned, and it's something the show seems to have a limitless supply of. That's surprises, unlimited surprises with Attack on Titan so far. I thought it would be more like a scientist or an inventor, but I love that he seems to be really gifted at engineering tactical plans. That's a type of genius I didn't anticipate. So now I can see him developing into a big picture commander, sort of like Ender in Ender's Game. And then I think the last thing I really want to talk about is the Eren reveal, because at the end, when the big Titan that helps save the day, the friendly Titan, the jolly green Titan, well, he falls, and Eren is revealed to be located more or less right where the Titan's weak spot is. So this makes me ask, do all Titans have a human there? Is that why it's their weak spot? When you're attacking the Titan's weak spot, you're like killing the human that's the battery or the CPU for the Titan. And this kind of relates back to my weapon gone wrong theory. Like this was supposed to be a biological or a bioorganic mecha that soldiers could wear into battle, but they couldn't control it and they lost their own sense of self. And then I also want to know, how's this going to affect the squad if they realize they're killing a human every single time they take down a Titan? Like, is that going to make them less willing to take them down? Is it going to try to turn into fruitless rescue missions and have higher casualties? And then the real question is, if every Titan is fused with a human battery, which I'll use for lack of a better term, why was Eren able to maintain some kind of control? Like, is it just his strength of will, or is there more to it? And now I immediately think back to that dream sequence of his father with some kind of like hypodermic needle on a syringe that he was trying to inject him. So is Eren's ability to control his Titan related to a serum or like this alchemical or medical treatment? Does this relate back to that secret basement? Because they talk about a secret basement in episode 1 and then it's never mentioned again, and that's probably what that key goes to. Like, is there a stockpile of this serum in that basement? So does that mean that this can be repeated for other members of the squad? Does this mean they're going to go on some kind of mission to go unlock that secret basement and access this serum? And if suddenly the whole squad is able to fuse with Titans, how's that going to change the whole dynamic of the show? Like, if this happens, there could be, like, one thing that I think of as a significant shift in the tactical balance between humans and Titans. I mean, Titans are suddenly a lesser threat, and as a result, humans become a bigger threat. Possibly we get more human versus human intrigue if this technology is unlocked, and that could become the focus of the story rather than human versus Titan intrigue. And we also see that Eren fusing with the Titan allowed him to regrow lost limbs, so this regenerative, this healing ability, well, that also has a whole host of possible uses and implications. And I don't know if any of this will play out, but those are all the thoughts that bounce around in my head. They keep me engaged and facilitate my enjoyment of the show. I tried to tighten up this analysis compared to the previous episodes, trying to be a little more focused and avoid just simply recapping events, but I don't know if I did a very good job of that. Eventually, I'd like to be able to cover an entire arc in a single video, but I'll have to work on being more concise before I can do that. That's all I've got for now, so I'm gonna go watch episode 9. I'll talk to you soon. It's kind of like the superstar athletes don't usually become superstar coaches. It's kind of like the superstar athletes don't usually become superstar coaches.